All right, I think we're going to get started. Welcome everybody and everybody who's going to join soon and watch this later. This is our first seminar of the year, so welcome back. We're happy to see we had so many folks RSVP tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about basement flooding and reducing the risk on your property. Just a few orders of business before we get going though, and before I officially introduce Holly, who's going to be our speaker tonight. We are recording this, as you may have noticed. You can watch this after the fact on Facebook, on our Facebook page, or you can also go to our website at chicagobungalow.org. You can see all of our recordings since we've been doing these webinars for the last few years. So we have a huge number of wonderful things on there at this point. So don't be frantically taking notes if you don't want to. Other than that, we're going to finish tonight at around 7 o'clock. Holly will probably speak for around 45 minutes or so, and then we're going to take 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A afterwards. So just keep that in mind. I would recommend holding your questions a little bit. She's probably going to answer a bunch of stuff as we go. So, you know, maybe give it a second before you frantically start typing your questions in, but type them into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Do not use the chat. The chat, I think, may even be disabled, but please just use the Q&A tonight. We won't be checking the chat. So put everything there, and I will be going through those at the end, and we'll take care of those then. Let's see. Other than that, we've got our next seminar is going to be on March 28th. That is going to be all about Cook County property tax exemptions. If you do want to see that, definitely sign up at chicagobungalow.org/seminars. If you signed up for tonight as well, you're going to get an email after this that's going to have any relevant links that we might mention tonight. It'll also have a link to the recording, so you don't have to hunt for it on Facebook or our website. So keep that in mind as well. And it also just kind of helps us to know how many of you are going to be out there. I think that's about it. I am happy to introduce Holly Sauter, who's been with us before, to give this talk and did an amazing job. Holly is the principal civil engineer at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, where she manages green and gray infrastructure stormwater projects. She earned her bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Bradley University and her master's degree in public administration. She joined the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District in 2005 and has worked for the TARP, sewer design, real estate, and stormwater departments. Today, Holly is a professional engineer and a certified floodplain manager working in the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Program. She's been working towards alleviating urban flooding in the Chicagoland area for the past 10 years. Yeah, Holly, whenever you are ready, please feel free to unmute, share your screen, and we appreciate it.
All right, you can hear me? We're good to go. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm just gonna pop my slides on the screen. There we go. Okay. Tonight I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, who we are, what we do, and then also really what you're here for is to sort of talk about flooding, why it happens in your home, multiple directions, and then maybe some of the things that you can do to assist in trying to help alleviate some of that flooding in your home. We also have provided or created a Green Neighbor Guide. You can download that from our website. It's a free copy available for you to look at. So the MWRD is a basic introduction. We call ourselves the MWRD, or the district. You'll hear us also called, it's the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. We were created in 1889 as the Sanitary District of Chicago. Originally, I'm sure you've heard, the Chicago River was reversed. That was our mission originally, to protect Lake Michigan and the drinking water that came from that. We have a 9-member elected board of commissioners, and we have a service area quite large. It's 129 communities. There are 882 square miles of service area. And in 2021, we treated more than 400 billion gallons of water at our 7 reclamation plants. And then we also, in 2004, took over the responsibility for stormwater management for most of Cook County. And just to kind of back up a little bit here, you know, we originally started with drinking with wastewater and reversing the river to work with wastewater and protect Lake Michigan, and then also now have added on the stormwater management. So we kind of have two facets there. This is our current Board of Commissioners. The Board of Commissioners is elected among, we have a president, a vice president, and a finance chair. They are all a 6-year term, and those terms are, of course, staggered every 2 years. 3 seats are up for election. So our public affairs people have some absolutely tremendous photos. Feel free to go to our website and sign up for our daily email. They always include a historical photo. They're really great. We actually, going back to that sanitary district of Chicago, was started in 1889. And what we actually did was start working on protecting the environment through this water environment, which is 81 years before the US EPA was even created. Again, right, this is a picture of some of the work that was started back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, to address the pollution crisis stemming from the water supply in Lake Michigan. Here's another fantastic photo. Our first assignment, of course, was to reverse the flow of pollution away from the lake and send it back downstream to where the dirty water is diluted and eventually makes its way to the Gulf of Mexico. This was essentially the solution to pollution as dilution. Unfortunately, we learned not too long after that, right, that we needed to do some additional things. But we created a 61.3 mile system of canals, deepening and widening the waterways and using gravity to move that sewage and stormwater away from Lake Michigan. The sanitary ship canal, which is the one that runs adjacent mostly to I-55, was completed in 1900. We have the North Shore Canal, which was completed in 1910, and then also the CalSag, which is sort of along the Southwest Highway there in 1922. So this is a graphic of a typical home and how these sewer systems interact, both of your local and the MWRD sewer systems. So you can see here we have a home, and then we have your sewer coming out of the home. And then we also have street water runoff, and then we have some other miscellaneous runoff that can come from rain and other aspects that were miscellaneous that are picking up water. So what happens is that your system in your home and the street drains in what we call combined area are all collected by that local system. And then the local system eventually makes its way to this medium-sized pipe here, which is actually pretty large. We call those interceptor sewers. Those are owned and operated by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. And then many of you have heard about the deep tunnels, which we call our tunnel and reservoir plan, which is TARP, which is this large system down here. So when a lot of rain falls in a concentrated area over a short period of time, stormwater enters the sewers faster than the flow can be collected in them and exceeding what we're calling their flow capacity. When this happens, the combined sewage can't reach our system and get into the tunnels fast enough. So essentially, it's kind of like a bottleneck that you would think of on a highway. The local systems are usually, they were put in, Chicago's an old city, they were put in a very long time ago. So their size is not necessarily sized appropriately to the population, the density, the concrete, all of that we have going on to allow to receive all of that water properly. So it fills up as first and then makes its way to the interceptor or directly to our TARP system. But essentially what happens is that's small and it's flowing full and it can't get out fast enough. So what happens is that the water backs up in the manholes and up into the sewer systems, into your homes, into the streets, whatever the lowest lying point is. Now you might just say, well, why don't we replace all of the local systems, you know, to something huge so that it can just take everything away? But the cost for that is just so extremely significant that we have to start looking at other ways to essentially take some load off of those local systems, or sort of divert some of that water from entering that sewer to even to begin with. So that's some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Here is a picture from inside of one of our tunnels, which is the TARP system, the very large diameter sewers. Some of them are 300 feet deep, 30 feet in diameter. You can tell there's a gentleman standing here, and obviously there's still a lot of space to go above his head. In the 70s, MWRD began this work on this to mitigate and protect the local waterways from the pollution. TARP, the deep tunnel, captures the excess flow from those local sewers as much as it can, because when those local systems are full and they can't make it into an interceptor, there's a chance that they can go out what we call a combined sewer overflow, which is essentially just a relief pipe out to your local waterway to at least allow to keep water flowing and pushing it out into the water system, into the river system when it can't make it to a plant. So TARP was basically designed to try to capture as much of those combined sewer overflows, or CSOs, as possible. The entire project was carried forward in 2 phases. The first phase was the tunnels that you see here. They are 109 miles long, and they were completed in 2006, and they're currently in operation. We also have 2 major reservoirs. One of them is completed. It's in Thornton. It's the one you see off of I-80. That's the very large, deep pit that you can't really see the bottom from as you're driving along. And the other one is the McCook Reservoir, which is also along I-55. It's got 2 lobes. One of those lobes is completed and online, and the other one is currently under construction, hoping to be completed or estimated to be completed in 2029. TARP was the first system of this kind to be created, and other cities have copied this innovative project and implemented in their cities, such as London, Singapore, Vienna. There's a lot more than that, but those are some of the highlighted ones. So just to give you an idea of the service area and kind of the Cook County and where our 7 plants are, in the early 1900s, we realized, of course, that diluting our wastewater was not enough to adequately treat the water. So in the 20s and the 30s, we started treating the water that was coming from the sewer system. So we built hundreds and hundreds of miles of these larger diameter interceptors to pick up all these small local systems and take them to our plants. So we have the Calumet plant, Stickney, which is right along 55. We have Lamont, which is also along 55, along Lamont, close to Lamont Road. We have the O'Brien plant, which is up in Skokie. And we have the Curie Water Reclamation plant, which is along I-90, the Egan, and then also the Hanover Park plant. Just to give you a small concept of volumes, by the 1950s, we were already capturing and treating 1 billion gallons of combined sewage and stormwater per day. So with all of that, we go back to flooding in your home, and what can we do, and why are we looking at doing this? So understanding that your local system is a confined space, it's a bottleneck point, right? And also the other super important thing to think about when you think about this being a bottleneck is, how do you alleviate the bottleneck? So what you like to do is in a combined system, that's all of the rainwater, all of the water coming from your home, your laundry, your toilets, your dishes, everything, making it into the same pipe. But we know that stormwater that falls from the sky generally, isn't as dirty as the things that we use in our home or the waste that we create in our home. So in some communities that are that have access to a waterway, they are separating their sewers, or some areas have separated sewers where they have a sanitary. Then they also have a storm, and those storm sewers just go directly to the local waterway, allowing those sanitary to just collect wastewater. But Chicago being an older community, a large portion of it is combined. So what we look to do is to sort of take off that stormwater load as much as possible so that it's not making it into the sewer system, allowing more space for everyone to be able to use their home and not be flooded. So having said that, we look at what can we do to prevent flooding. Well, there's, 3 types on here that are probably the most common that people see with their home. There's seepage, which is when you see water kind of trickling through the foundation walls. You want to carefully inspect or hire someone, of course, right, to come out and inspect the foundation wall. And is it the water in the groundwater actually, creating a lot of pressure against the walls of your home and finding cracks and other ways to sort of seep in to relieve the pressure against the walls. So those things can be repaired, and varying costs, of course, depending on what you find. But that's one. There's also ponding entering your window wells or basement doors. So if you have like a walkout basement, or if you have window wells, they're very common ways for water to enter a basement. You want to look at the ground around those entries, whether it's at the window well or at the basement door. Is the ground sloping towards it, or is it away from it? You want to look at, of course, making sure that any grounds adjacent to those entries are sloped away as much as possible. And then you can even, install drains around the outsides of those to try to move the water away quickly. The most common one, and the one that, of course, we all see quite frequently, and I've suffered from myself, is basement backup. And basement backup is the most unfortunate. Sometimes it's a dirty mess. It's usually when you have a floor drain or a low drain, such as a toilet perhaps, in your basement or low area of your home, where the water just comes back up from the sewer. That local sewer bottleneck is full. It's throwing as fast as it can. It's also receiving water from every other home, and the water has nowhere to go except back up through your floor drain, because that's the lowest elevation. Water finds the path of least resistance. So if you have basement backup issues, private drains can be clogged. So it's usually not horribly expensive to have somebody come out and televise your sewer, have it rotted, just make sure that it's free, flowing, clear, because of course, if there's a clog in the pipe and you're pushing water towards it and it's too much, it's also going to back up and it's not even going to make it out correctly. The other thing that people can do is also install overhead sewers, which are an expensive option, but do pretty much entirely eliminate all possibilities of basement backup. There are also a couple other less expensive, still expensive, but less expensive ways to work against those basement backups. You can have a check valve installed outside of your home, or there's some other combined systems that can be done. You can use a standpipe, which of course you'd want to talk to a plumber, a certified sewer plumber for all of these things. I can't give you direct advice for these. Standpipes are also very common. I've seen them a lot. And then one of the other things that's also very important is kind of going back to that idea about removing stormwater out of your combined system, is to it's really important to make sure that your downspouts are not connected into the sewer, that they're allowed to daylight or, basically pop up out of the ground, and allow for that water to sheet flow across the ground. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So stormwater management, there are various ways that we protect our water. One of the major ways we accomplish this is, in addition to TARP, is by better handling that stormwater, trying to keep a lot of that out of the system. Here you can look at the trends of the precipitation from 1980 to 2019. And I don't think it's a surprise to anyone here that there's a clear trend of more rainfall occurring now than there used to be. The average rainfall has gone up for significant storms about an inch in this area for these major storms. And if you think about 1 inch of rain across our entire service area, it's equivalent to 17 billion gallons of water. And that's water that has to get captured and treated if it's not removed from the local system. So in 2004, again, the MWRD took over the authority, the Regional Stormwater Authority for Cook County. And because of that, we stepped into action and kind of took a multifaceted approach to this issue of stormwater and flooding. We created watershed plans, 6 watershed plans. So we have a watershed is basically, there's a river, what areas around that river essentially are tributary or flow naturally to that water body. So we look at those watershed plans, we look at what water is coming there, where's the flooding occurring, and sort of try to create like a regional mapping detail of the issues that are there, see if there's viable projects in those areas. Additionally, we have stormwater partnership opportunities, which is one of our most successful programs that we do every year. We partner with the local community. We ask them, what problems do you have? Where's your flooding? What can we do to help? Do you have any ideas? So we do everything from being a funding partner to something they've already identified and have done the engineering on, but they might not have all of the funding capacity, to the entire opposite side of the spectrum where they tell us we have this huge problem. We can't figure it out. We haven't had the funding to be able to do the engineering and the construction. Can you help us? So we'll step in and do that as well. We have master planning, which also will come into an area that's known for flooding and try to create an overall approach for that whole area. And then last, but certainly not least, we have this small streams maintenance program, which is these 2 pictures here. This is our Summit conduit. And what you see is obviously there's a lot of debris. There's a lot of logs and things that are picked up by our rivers, and tires. Tires are very common. And so our small streams maintenance program, they're available for calling at any time. If you see an obstruction in a waterway, they come out and they clean it up. They haul off the debris and take care of that to make sure that the water systems are flowing properly. So I know this map is a little daunting, but this shows a variety of the different types of projects that we've done since 2004, all on our boundaries. And you can see we've done something all over. We've done well more than 200 projects, and this flooding reduction has been significant for well over 16,000 homes. We also, in this, which may be of interest to some people, we have what's called a watershed management ordinance, which is part of review when anyone needs to do, especially commercial, but anything over I think it's anything over half an acre. If they're going to do any significant renovation, construction, demolition, etc., they have to get a permit from us. And That permit will require them to retain water or detain water on their property. Depending on the size, we require certain volumes and things like that to make sure that they're managing their own stormwater and not affecting their neighbors. So green infrastructure. This is my current bread and butter. TARP is, you might hear the words gray and green infrastructure. TARP, the giant tunnel program, is gray because it relies on the traditional thoughts of concrete pipes, sewer systems, water treatment. However, as we've talked about, right, storms are increasing, and we know that we need to remove water, the stormwater, from our combined sewer systems. So one of the ways that we do that is through green infrastructure. So you've probably heard or seen of green alleys. This is one of the green alleys that we have completed. And I know it's not very green, but the idea is underneath, the green's all underneath. Essentially what happens is that these asphalt or gravel or concrete alleys are replaced, and there is aggregate storage underneath. And that allows for the water to percolate in and infiltrate back into the earth. We also have a green roof at our Racine Avenue pump station. The Racine Avenue pump station is at 39th, and this is Bubbly Creek back here in the background. This is an example of a permeable street that we helped fund in Tinley Park with their pretty piano keys. And we have a commuter lot in Riverside, and also they installed 2 different bioswale or rain garden areas adjacent to that to allow any additional runoff to make it into those rain gardens. And here is a rain garden that's been installed in the parkway. The parkway is essentially the space between your curb and your sidewalk. It's owned by your municipality or the city. Even though you politely maintain it, but they can also find ways to sort of divert some of that water that's falling on the street into these rain garden areas and allow it to infiltrate back into the ground. And then we also have a Space to Grow School, which is our city partnered program. It's with the CPS schools and the Department of Water Management. We are the third partner. We take schoolyards that look similar to this, where there's a lot of asphalt, there's not a lot of functional space for the kids to actually, you know, play and learn and do. And you can tell that the green space back there's had better days, and it probably is pretty boggy and muddy during a rainy day, so they can't really use it. And we transform them into things like this. So this is sneaky green infrastructure. The the areas under this blue where this play mat is are actually aggregates. So the water can seep through that blue play space and into that aggregate to be stored and absorbed back into the earth. And then we also put in turf fields, which also have that same aggregate system. And then that water infiltrates back into the earth and allows that play space to be available immediately after a rain. Those were larger scale green infrastructure projects that we do, but we can certainly now drill down into maybe what you could do at something at more your level or something that's easy for your property. This is again just a promotion for the Green Neighbor Guide. It's printed in 2020. Again, it's on our website. Feel free to poke around. There's lots of things there for you to read and look at. As it says, of course, we all play a role in alleviating flooding in our community, becoming a green neighbor by considering these projects around your home, by collecting more rainwater and keeping it out of the combined system. So this would be a rain garden in the back of someone's property. We'll talk about some of the design considerations that can be done, but what this would do is essentially take this roof runoff from this garage, and you can even see they have a rain barrel there in the back in the orange, and they're taking that water and collecting it in this area where these plants are very tolerant of being moist and wet for long periods of time and can really, like, they're deep rooted and can absorb that water. So here's a graphic, and we've got quite a few things here. Try to run through them pretty quickly. Steps that you can do before a rainstorm. Pay attention to the forecast, obviously. Make sure that your gutters and your drains are clear, because that will obviously impact your home. If you do have basement flooding, you should also consider talking to a sewer plumber to see what your options are for your home. Another smart thing is your system, or we call them laterals, that come out of your home to the local system, your sewer line, can get clogged with plant roots, tree roots. A lot of living debris can break through those systems, and that of course will create clogs and blockages in your system. So if you're looking to re-landscape your property or move things or plant a tree, it's really a good idea to be cognizant of where your sewer line is, to just make sure that that landscaping is not going to create those intrusions into your sewer. If you have a sump pump, you should check it regularly, make sure that it's working. And then, of course, we're going to talk about disconnecting those downspouts, make sure the water is not making it into the system, that it has a chance to feed your grass and move across your ground properly. There's rain barrels, which are shown on the sides of this property, that you can do. Any clean outs, which can also be those check valves. It's like a round PVC cap with probably a square in the middle that you might see in your front yard or backyard. Just make sure that there is a cap on it and it's not broken off or missing. And then, of course, if you do get flooded, whether it's from the basement backup or you don't know why, but you got flooded, report it to your local so that they can create a record, because we can only do as much as we can with the data that we're able to collect. So we don't know. Unfortunately, there's a lot of times when people do get flooded from a variety of reasons, and we don't know that there's a problem in that area because it's not been reported. So downspout disconnections. This is actually a pretty common thing across the county, where they were connected into the sewer system at one point in time, but it's actually creating a lot of water into the system that's unnecessary. So a few key things about those downspouts, if you do happily decide to disconnect them, you want to make sure that the downspout, when you do disconnect it, can travel away, that you've got that extra piece of pipe like you see here to go at least 6 feet away from your home, just to make sure that that water doesn't soak into the ground and then wind up coming back through a seepage. The other thing is that you want to give that water enough away from the house or anything with a sub basement, but also give it enough space away from the street or sidewalks or driveways, that it allows that water to sort of travel across the land and have it give its own chance to absorb into the earth. You don't want a steep slope, because obviously then you'll get a lot of erosion and your grass won't be able to grow if it's being sloughed away too much with that water. And also in the wintertime, if your downspout is too close to your neighbor's property or the driveway or the sidewalk, it will freeze over and people can slip and fall. So here's a nice little example of what a successful one looks like. Rain barrels. Rain barrels are pretty popular. Here's a nice one that we have. And you can also use these to water plants. It's not potable water, you shouldn't drink it, but it's great for the plants because it's not treated with the chemicals and other things that we use for our drinking water. They are watertight. They usually have a spigot on the end. It's good to elevate them so you can use them for gravity feeding for your plants if that's what you choose to do with it. They're usually placed directly beneath the downspout, and the downspout just comes right into it. And you can actually connect these in tandem. If you've got a lot of water from one downspout and it's actually overflowing, you can put a couple of them together. Here's some of the tools, which I'll just skip over, but know that in the Green Neighbor Guide, these things are available. And we also have a video on how to install your rain barrel on our YouTube website. And then I just copied this graphic off of our website today. The rain barrels delivery was suspended during the winter, but it's back up and running now in March. So here are the current prices as of today and the 4 different options that are available. They will be delivered to your home. Dry wells. Dry wells are much less common, but they're worth a note. They are a professional install. Typically a buried container with small holes on the sides that collect that storm water and let it reabsorb back into the earth. They're good for where space is limited, where you don't want water ponding on the surface. But they also, of course, have to be a certain specific distance away from a structure that has a basement or a subgrade level to protect those buildings. Rain gardens and bioswales. We've talked a little bit about these. They are depressed areas with plantings that also have some special engineered soil planted underneath the bottom of that allows for the water to infiltrate. They're supposed to drain within 24 hours. That's how they're designed. And we prefer to use native vegetation. And the reason for that really is because native vegetation in our area tends to have very deep roots, and very deep roots just means they drink a bunch more water, which is a great thing. And they're also really important and really beneficial for pollinators and insects in the area. And, you know, they also have very pretty flowers. There are species out there, I promise, that have nice flowers. Again, some tools that you'll find in the Green Neighbor Guide. And planting plans. These are natives, they're very pretty. But when you are getting ready to do a rain garden, there are certain things that are important. If you have taller plants that you'd like to use, you should put them in the center. Large perennials 2 to 3 feet apart, and shrubs and need at least half of their mature diameter apart. So it's going to look kind of sparse when you first plant this, but within a year or two, it's really going to fill out. You just really, that first couple years, you just have to be super diligent about weeding. And then once those plants start to fill in, they just take over, and weeding isn't nearly as much of an issue when these are successfully rooted properly. And then permeable pavement. This one is, again, this is used in green alleys and in that Tinley Park Piano Key Street. These are bricks that are separated slightly. They have a small gap in between them, and then that gap is filled with what we call chip, which is tiny stone. And underneath this is a large space that's been dug out and refilled with large size stone to allow the water to sit in between the gaps of those stone and essentially hold that water and let it reabsorb back into the earth, back into the groundwater table, trying to keep all that water out of the sewer system. So you'll see a lot of paver driveways and even some paver roadways. They're not all permeable. The kind of the trick to look at is when you look and you do see this gap and you can see that tiny chip in there. Not 100% guaranteed, but odds are that is more of a permeable space, because if you go look at your patio, for example, odds are the bricks are flush together for the most part. So those are not permeable surfaces. Besides that, it looks like I am ending right about on time. Water is, you know, a huge resource, and it can also be a huge heartache for us all. I completely understand. Like I said, I've had basement backup myself. It's horrible to deal with. And so I'm here to answer any questions. You know, we have over 5 million residents that we serve, and we're really trying to get the message out and to help in any way possible for everyone to understand what your sewer does and then also what you can do to help your own property. So, Carla?
Yeah, thank you. You really are right on time. Nicely done. There's so many things to cover. And I just think it's so great to really to actually understand why things are flooding, and the infrastructure of everything, I think, is so critical. And also how things like just cleaning your gutters and messing with your downspouts can make such a huge difference. But we've got a good number of questions here. We're going to get through as many as we can by 7. Forgive me, sometimes people put really long and specific questions. We might not be able to get to some of those, so I apologize, but I will do the best I can. So how much flooding in your basement is considered too much before it can be reported to insurance, and that they can actually cover? Sorry, that was tripped over a little bit.
Well, just to go down that rabbit hole a bit, in no way am I an insurance agent, and I don't know what they do. You'd have to contact your agent. Personally speaking, I know that I only had maybe 3 or 4 inches, but I had a lot of grit and other things that came back in the sewer. So I called, but I also know that I had to have a special writer on my insurance. But that's just personal experience. In no way do I know what your insurance company does, and I would recommend calling them.
Yeah, quite a variety. As a second part of this question, I'm not sure if you know this one, Holly, but does the city of Chicago accept claims for their involvement in the flooding of private property?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Do you recommend installing a sump pump and an ejector pump in the basement?
So they're 2 different things. An ejector pump is for sewage that's at a subgrade level. Usually, your sewer pops out right about the end of the bottom of your basement, typically speaking. And when you have a toilet, obviously the toilet goes into the ground, and now that's lower than your sewer, and you need something to push it up and into your sewer system. So an ejector pit is solely for wastewater that's in your home, and a sump pump is solely to drain the water, the groundwater and stormwater that is sitting around the edge of your property, because groundwater creates a lot of pressure on the walls of your home, which is why you hear about people putting in French drains and other things, and essentially draining that into the sump pump and then pushing it back out and away from your property.
So can't hurt, basically, if you have both of those issues.
Well,
yeah,
they're 2 different things. So you'd have to look at
right. And since you brought up French drains, do you recommend installing a French drain around the foundation of your home?
If you have flooding, it's certainly something that, it's worth looking into. It probably depends on the severity of your flooding, if that would be enough to adequately do.
And those can be, so the French drain is the same thing as when you dig out around the outside,
create like,
because I feel like I hear that term used in different ways, or sometimes just like a pitch, like a pitched above ground surface. Okay, so that is another way of describing that. And someone's probably going to ask, I think when you do that dig out, it's something like 10 or 15,000. At least it was before the pandemic. I don't know what prices are at all anymore, but somewhere around $10,000 to $15,000, I think, to dig around the outside. Does that maybe sound right to you?
Maybe. It depends on what they're doing too, because a lot of them will also do like an impermeable membrane against the foundation of the home when they do dig that out to create a blockage for the seepage while they do the French drain.
Okay, so that could be extra. Okay. I'm going to skip these longer ones just in case we don't have time. We have a contractor. We had a contractor suggest an ejector pump / overhead sewer system as part of a basement remodel. Are these typically effective to eliminate backflow into your home?
Overhead sewers are the most secure way to ensure that you will not have backup in your home. They're also, unfortunately, the most expensive.
Okay. Can you just talk a little bit about what an overhead sewer is?
Sure. So they eventually essentially take your sewer line, which is in the ground below your foundation, right? And they install a pump and it kicks it up. It basically takes a pipe and it takes it up, takes it above ground to an elevation above ground and brings it back down and puts it back into the sewer. So that basically what you're doing is, again, if your sewer's full, sorry, I still use my hands as a graphic. If your sewer's full and the road is here, right, water goes to the path of least resistance. So if the water's backing up, it's going to go back up your sewer. But if your sewer goes up and over where ground level is, right, the water's going to go everywhere else before it goes up that high, right? It would come up in the street before it would ever come back all that way up into your sewer system because it's so high.
Got it.
Okay. Not the easiest to explain.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate your pantomimes. Our home has the gutters disconnected from the sewer, and there's a cap going into the ground, and they have downspouts. Are you allowed to reconnect into the sewer system, or are you advised not to?
Ooh, that's a huge no-no in pretty much every community. And they will find, like, if they find out you redid it or somebody comes in and builds one like that, a lot of times some communities will fine you. Now, again, it's your community, right?
Yeah, right. I just want to warn people too, people are still putting questions in. We only have 10 more minutes. So just to warn you, we're probably not going to get to a lot of the later ones. How can I assess relative flooding risk of a property when I'm looking for a new home? What questions should I ask a seller to better understand any flood prevention mechanisms that have been set up for the home?
That's a really good question. So when you're looking to buy a new home, it's very scary, obviously, for flooding if you've been flooded. Otherwise, you never worry about it. So I would look at proximity to the local waterway and make sure that you know whether the home is or is not in the floodplain, because that's a different issue. Floodplain's another animal and requires additional insurance and things like that. The other thing is I would call the municipality that the home is in. If it's the city, call 311 or, the local that's there, the local government, and ask them about flooding reports in that area or at that home, because they should share that data with you if they have any. And technically, legally, the homeowner is responsible or required to report to the potential buyer if there has been any flooding. I think it's only been like in the last year, which, you may or may not get in that window, but you'd have to ask your real estate agent about that a little bit more. And there are also very telltale signs when you walk into a property, if it hasn't been repaired recently, that you can walk into a basement and see signs of water damage on the walls or on the floors. Do they have carpet down there? Is it tile with nothing down there? Things like that are kind of things that you can look for.
Yeah, strong moldy smell too is usually not the greatest sign. Yeah.
Yeah.
A bunch of people who want to know how they can get a green alley.
Well, if you're in the city, you'd have to talk to your local. We partner with the Chicago Department of Transportation for green alleys, but it's up to them to determine priority level, funding, capacity, all of the things that come along with being able to put a green alley in municipalities. Call your local public works director and talk to them about, about the opportunity to work with us and if it's possible.
Okay, this is sort of similar to the one you just responded to about how much you can get with 311, et cetera. But is there a way to get a larger sort of community history of flood mitigation in the area, like a larger sort of piece of, or maybe it's the same phone call, where you can just sort of like what infrastructure has been done near me and in my neighborhood?
Yeah, it's basically the same. And actually, I'm forgetting the obvious one in the room. You can contact me or us. And if we have any data of historical flooding in those areas, of course, we can provide any general information like that.
Great. Okay, we need to replace our own old concrete sidewalk. What's the best choice for a sidewalk between houses? Because we all know those dreaded gangways tip one way or the other. You're the lucky neighbor or the unlucky neighbor, who's getting all the water in your foundation or not, especially with bungalows. Yeah. So any advice on that?
Well, the tricky thing I will just say about the permeable pavers or there are permeable concretes and permeable asphalt out there, just saying. It's similar to when I talked about having your downspout go 6 feet away from your home. You also, with any permeable surface where you're intending to create some storage underground, it's important to keep that away from your basement foundation. If you're on a slab, it's different. But we just don't want to create, obviously, a problem in your home from the seepage from trying to do this great thing, right? So odds are a gangway is probably not a great place for anything permeable unless you do like some significant waterproof liners along the home, and then it kind of defeats the purpose anyway. So
yeah. I've heard some people mention, like, if they have enough space and they have a good relationship with their neighbor, kind of having that like sort of not really French drain, but that like pitch towards the center thing at least help with some of that flow.
Yeah, it's a swale. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Can a block club or individual request rain gardens for their block? Are there any good programs people can appeal to?
It would. So the MWRD can only partner with other government agencies, but it doesn't mean that they shouldn't appeal to their local, whether it's the city or the municipality, about the idea. The one thing that we do ask about rain gardens, just giving this full disclosure, if the community wants to put rain gardens in the parkway, we ask that the homeowners that live at that address sign off and give us a letter of approval, because we want to make sure that they know that they're going to have these really nice native plants, but it's going to look different and it has to be maintained different, because we don't want them to go fill it in, rip it out, any of those other, be unhappy with that being in front of their home. So it's just important that everybody knows what the responsibilities are with rain gardens.
Right. There's the idea that you should always mow your lawn, and then you plant these natives. We had a story about that years back. But is a dry well the same thing and or similar to a French drain? I know you talked a bit about dry wells.
It's a little bit different because it's more of like you could think of like a giant tub that's put in the ground with some holes poked into it, versus a French drain, which would run horizontally along and capture that water and probably put it into a dry well if that's what you wanted.
Yeah. Okay. I live in Brookfield, and during heavy rainfall, half the houses on our block get water in the basement. Is this an indication that there's something wrong with the village stormwater management rather than an individual house issues?
I'm also in Brookfield. Hello, neighbor.
I thought I saw you smile out of the corner of my peripheral. Yeah. Basement
backup is not unique to any community. It's a countywide problem. It's a very common problem. Depends on what part of town you're in, because there is floodplain here, which is also a different animal. And then again, it just goes to that undersized capacity of sewer systems. So what happens is that, if you have basement backup, the city can only do so much, arbitrarily the city, whichever community you're in. So really, as a homeowner, you have the responsibility to protect your own home, right? So that's why a lot of communities will do also 50-50 programs on basement backup. You'll have to ask them, but a lot of communities will pay up to 50% to do one of these flood protection basement backup programs. So they'll pay half.
Yeah. I love this question. I always love the low-hanging fruit. How often and when should you clean your gutters?
More than I do. I would say probably at least twice a year, right? Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm not a roofing expert, but it probably depends too on how much tree cover you have and how tall your house is, right?
Right, yeah, and any maintenance guide you look at it for any season always tells you to clean your gutters, so I think at least 2 times a year is a really good answer, yeah. Makes a huge difference. Someone asked about a list of certified sewer plumbers in Chicago. I don't know if you have a specific place to point people to. We have a whole list of contractors on our website at chicagobungalow.org, broken up by category. And we also tell you if they serve the whole city, only the north side, only the south side. So you can search accordingly as well. I think Angela might be actually typing something in right now if anybody wants to look at that. But did you have anything to add to that, Holly, of good places to look?
No, sorry, we don't keep lists like that. So.
Okay. Let's see. My neighbor's gutters are overflowing water to my property. How can I get them to fix it? It's causing flooding on my foundation and causing my water seepage.
That is a signet that happens a lot too, unfortunately. The best thing you can do is call your village or your community and try to get them to help you. If you talk to them and they're not, yeah.
I mean, make friends is if at all possible to make friends with your neighbor first. Right. Otherwise, call your alderman, I would say. Okay, then who's responsible for removing tree roots? We have trees that sit between my property and the neighbors.
Your sewer line is your responsibility from the street to your home.
So how
if there are tree roots in the line between your home and the street, you have to call somebody who cleans tree roots out of your sewer line.
So even if the tree is on their property more, if the roots are
in your sewer line, you're the only one affected. Right?
Got it. Okay. No, that's a really important distinction though.
But yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. I heard rain barrels can attract mosquitoes. Do you any suggestions on minimizing that impact?
The key to that really is just to make sure that you don't fill the rain barrel with the storm and then just leave it sit for weeks, right? Like mosquitoes really only show up after water has been stagnant for, I don't know what it is, 72 hours or a week or something like that. So using that water or just getting that water, a day or two after the storm, let the water just flow out if you're not using it to water a garden or anything like that. And it will infiltrate back into the earth as well that way.
Yeah. We're at 7. Just one question. I think maybe Angela actually answered it as well, but just so we have it on this recording for everyone to hear again. Somebody was saying, all of the houses on their block have basement flooding. Can you just repeat again who people should contact so that you guys know, so that you get the memo on like, okay, this area is really being hit hard. Like who should they contact for that?
That's the information that's really like, that's the hardest job for us, right? Is trying to collect that data because people don't call. They've done it so often, they get used to it. Please call your local. I don't know if it's the city, call 311 and report your basement backup, because I know for a fact that the city keeps a map with all the dots showing when that's occurred and how often it's occurred. And then also other municipalities keep those records as well. So when we do a request for, do you need help? Where's your project? Where are issues in your community? You're only going to bubble to the top when they know that there's an issue in that area. So it's important to report that.
Yeah, and get all the neighbors too as well. Like
exactly.
I would say,
exactly.
And then so 311, I would say, and your alderman, and if you're in the city, both of those, I'd say, put a little pressure that way as much as you can. Probably get things through. Okay, well, we're after 7, so I will respect your time and everybody else's. But thank you so much, Holly. We really appreciate it. Again, just to remind folks, we do have another seminar on March 28th. It's all about Cook County property tax exemption. So sign up at chicagobungalow.org/seminars. Yeah, thank you again. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Anytime. I'm more than happy to do it.
Wonderful. All right. Everybody else out there, have a great night and take care. We'll see you next time.